This is Frank Islam, Chairman and CEO of FY Investment Group and your host of Washington Current Review, where we interview leading voices from business and politics that impact you, the viewer. Today, our guest is, we're fortunate enough to have Chidanand Rajghatta. Chidu, nice to meet you, nice to know you. Thank you very much for coming. We appreciate that very much. And you're a journalist.
Thank you for having me here, Frank.
Sure, you're most welcome. Tell me a little bit about yourself. And I know you work for Times of India, you're a journalist. And then I want to ask you a question about your experience as a journalist here in this country and in India. So tell me a little bit about yourself first.
Well, I am a journalist. Like you said, I started my career in India back in the 80s. I came here in 1994.
Oh, you've been here a long time.
I've been here 20 years, 21 years now. I started in India in Bangalore, which is my hometown, and then moved to Delhi, worked in Delhi and Mumbai before I came here. I was the resident editor of Indian Express in Mumbai in 93, 94.
So you have a very distinguished career.
I've had a reasonably good career. I'm happy with the career I've had. So I came here, I was posted here in 1994. It was the beginning of, it was midway through President Clinton's first term, and also the beginning of what is now a fairly intense engagement between US and India, but those days it was kind of more tentative. And I've seen 21 years of US-India relationship through 3 presidencies and 5 or 6 presidential
We'll talk
elections.
about that, the upward trajectory or the downward trajectory. We'll talk about it. So the question that I have for you, this country has a shared values and shared interest and a shared destiny with India as well as the United States, because of the fact that we both are a democratic country, democracy and the diversity, most of the shared interests and shared values are. So, and the freedom of the faith, freedom of religion, and the freedom of the press. Those are the hallmarks of our both countries, and I take a lot of pride in it. So there's a lot of things we have in common. Our bonds are stronger than the differences that too often drive us apart.
Right.
So my question to you is, what's your experience as a journalist in this country and your experience that wonderful distinguished career that you had in India?
You know, you said it, because these are 2 countries, which have many shared values, and in which many ways are joined at the hip. And if you look at Indian diaspora and Indian migration right now, at this point in time, there are more people of Indian origin in the United States than in any other country, if you really look at it.
Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. We have, the Indian Americans?
3.5 million.
3.5 million.
Right.
There are probably more people of Indian origin in the Gulf countries, in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, but they're not.
Yeah, exactly. They're more transient.
Right,
they're more,
it.
The working class who go back and forth.
They're not the social, economic, political fabric of that nation, of that part of the world.
Absolutely. Whereas here, they're well
they're directly engaged and involved.
Yeah, and then if you look at their profile, it's an incredible profile.
Yes.
We've heard it all. They're the highest earning, highest academic.
But they're model immigrant to this nation.
So it's a remarkable story, I think, and it's only growing. The way I've seen it, actually, from the 80s, almost every census, the Indian American population has about approximately doubled. It's gone from 400,000 to 800,000 to 1.6 million to 3.
Well, a lot of them came as an immigrant also. So
they did.
I think that most of the 3.5 million populations, as I understand, in 80 to 90% are the immigrants.
Absolutely.
They're not born in this country.
And you know the story, and I believe you're yourself a great example of,
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I take a lot of pride in my birth in India.
Right, and your success is what defines the Indian American community. And particularly after the 90s, when I came here, in the last 20 years, it's accelerated, and it's an incredible achievement. I've spent a better part of my career here chronicling many of the success stories like yours, both on the East Coast and particularly in California and Silicon Valley, and it is an amazing story.
It is amazing.
There is not a sphere of activity in this country now where there are not Indian Americans present.
I would agree with you 100%. So they're the great ambassador of India.
Absolutely.
And so in addition to the government-to-government engagement, we need a people-to-people engagement, and we also need a business-to-business engagement. And the diaspora community plays a very important role in this country, especially what happened in the nuclear trade thing, which we'll talk about it. So shed some light on India's U.S.-India relationship, that's number one, and shed some light India's relationship with its neighbors, especially the Pakistan and China.
Right. Well,
I just went with President Obama to India.
I believe you did, yes.
Yeah,
so,
and it was a great, by the way, a productive trip. It was a great trip.
yeah. As you know, we live in a very complicated neighborhood, and for historical reasons.
A difficult neighborhood as well.
A difficult neighborhood, and for historical reasons, we have not always been, fully engaged with the United States. There was a strange dichotomy for many decades after our independence, whereas a lot of Indians came to the United States to study and prospered here, the government-to-government relationship was at some points dodgy because of various Cold War reasons, which we're not going to. But all that began to change in the 90s, and in fact, like I said, when I came here in '94, I first came here in '93 to sort of case the place before I moved here. President Clinton was in office, and interest in India began in '95. Actually, I very distinctly remember Commerce Secretary Ron Brown at that time went to India. This was the first big visit after a long gap. And then First Lady Hillary Clinton went in '95.
You're absolutely right.
And then, of course, every year we expected President Clinton to go, which is how I got to stay back. I initially came here on what I thought was a 2-year tour of duty.
And you stayed longer
My
than
office
that.
kept saying, oh, the president is going to go visit India, so stay there. And it went on, and he finally went in 2000.
Yes.
And we have seen after that, successive presidents have gone. President Clinton went, and then President Bush went, and then President Obama has now gone
he went twice.
So the engagement has picked up in pace and intensity.
So we need to strengthen, broaden, and deepen our engagement with India?
I think it is.
In terms of the trade, commerce, business, investment, national
absolutely,
security.
absolutely.
There's many issues. Energy.
Absolutely, and
education.
all that is happening. Well, education is something that we have been engaged with the United States for a long time. I mean, the number of Indian students who graduate from here.
Education, when I say is not the elite school, it's talking about the community colleges.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's a very important role they're going to play.
Yeah.
In India, India has a shortage of the community colleges.
Absolutely.
So they can sort of work with us as a partner.
I believe there's a lot of work being done on that right now as we speak. So yes.
So shed some light on these all these things about the.
Absolutely, trade. India is a massive opportunity for the United States. It's a huge market, which is why you see so much.
Especially the middle class.
The middle
which
class,
is
it's a growing
million.
middle class. When you were with President Obama, you would have seen. He also went with a large business delegation, including you.
Well, there was only 9 of us.
Really? Yeah.
The India side was about 32 CEOs participated.
I believe there were a lot of individuals who also went
They
from
went
India
to USIBC,
separately.
but they're not part of the delegation.
So
they were not part of the White House delegation.
It tells you that it's a market which interests the United States, and secondly, despite all we talk about, difficulties, red tape, etc., it's the ease of doing business because it's essentially an English-speaking country which is fairly open. And the processes are simple to understand, even if there are a lot of regulatory hurdles, and also the judicial system is gridlocked. And these are problems that will get sorted out. But it's a huge opportunity for the United States, and similarly for India, United States presents a great opportunity. So there is talk of trade between the two countries reaching, $500 billion.
Oh, close to $1 trillion by 10 years.
Yeah, some people are even projecting $1 trillion. It's only about 100 billion right now, so there is a lot of upside.
100 billion.
Yeah. Oh. So there's a lot of upside, to engagement between the two countries. And then, of course, there's the whole strategic thing. Like I said, we live in a complicated neighborhood, and
the rise of China.
The rise of China, I believe, both India and US tread cautiously here. They don't want to project the idea that China is an adversary, but it's a country that they both want to manage and work with in a constructive way. And
very well put.
They're moving very cautiously on that.
What about Pakistan? That's also their neighbor. And I firmly believe, and I said that many times when I was in India, it is in India's interest, and as well as Pakistan's interest. The India's interest to make sure Pakistan is prosperous, peaceful, safe, and secure.
Right. I don't think there's any doubt about that, and I think successive Indian governments have tried to work towards
engage.
It. The question here is whether Pakistan itself understands, where it wants to go.
I think the Pakistan public understands it. And the new generation has a better understanding.
The new generation does, but they have a lot of entrenched history which they need to sort out. It's a complicated country with a very complicated psychology. They're going through a very, very difficult time, and there has to be a lot of internal resolution about their history and their geography. They have to reconcile a lot of things. It has essentially so far been a revisionist state, which is constantly trying to redraw its borders, even as they're losing territory. Internally, they lost in '71 a lot of territory.
Oh, you're talking about the partition in Bangladesh.
The partition, and even now, they're a country not entirely in control of everything within. So they have a lot of issues to resolve, but eventually, I do believe that these two countries,
there's so much in common.
There is absolutely
share
so much
background,
in common.
share belief, share heritage, share history.
Geography. I always say, how ridiculous it is that if there is a shortage in Lahore of onions or potatoes,
why can we ship them?
It has to go through Dubai or some place.
We can go through Karachi.
Yeah, when it can go through right across the border from Amritsar, a distance of 20 miles. So yes, these are two countries which eventually have to, come to an understanding and work in a constructive way. And by the way, they also present a huge economic opportunity.
No question about that. In terms of the economy, the trade, the investment, the tourism, there's so much huge opportunities. And I think they need to, both countries to harness the resources. I would hope that the new generation will take it to the next step. To make sure that both countries can work together, because they do have a shared goals and shared responsibility, and hopefully shared sacrifices. Now, the question that I have for you, and you touched upon a little bit about the diaspora community. They're very active in politics. They're very much engaged in political activity. They have a seat on the table. They make sure they have their voice, and the vision and the values. What role do they play, and what the role they should play, the diaspora community in the United States, and also how they play important roles to promote the trade? And the reason I was saying that, when I met the Prime Minister, I said, Mr. Prime Minister, you represent the state of Gujarat, which has a lot of hotels, and they own 40% of the hotels in the United States. So why cannot we open all those hotels over here in India?
I believe that's happening. I believe a lot of them. The trouble so far with India has been all the regulatory hurdles.
I think they have to ease the way of doing business, and they have to they have to cut the red tape and all the rules and regulation, economic reform. There are many challenges, and make sure the IPR and make sure the judiciary system is there. There's many, and invest in infrastructure. Infrastructure does not exist.
But I do believe that the Indian diaspora is substantially, now starting to go back and both invest in areas like you mentioned, and also in other areas. The 3 or 4 most significant area where Indian Americans have been very successful in the U.S. have been, like you said, the hotel, the mid-size hospitality industry, as they call it. I also believe academia is another big one.
You're absolutely
right. Huge academic workforce here. You go to any engineering school or business school, you find at least 15-20% of the faculty is of Indian origin. And a lot of them, have the knowledge base and interest in going back. And I think Indian universities and the Indian education system, should facilitate, if not them
a deeper engagement,
at least a rotational thing where they go and teach there for a semester or 2. And there have been some models where they've tried that. The Indian School of Business in Hyderabad was one such. People have gone from here to teach.
I went to Global Jindal University, which is not too far from me.
Yeah, and a lot of other institutions, Indian Institute of Science and IIMs have also had programs where Indian Americans go from here to teach. So I think that.
So you're talking about the exchange of the students, the faculty.
Yeah. And the one area where we have also missed out is, for the longest time, although many Indian students have come and students from India have come and graduated from universities, we don't see the reverse movement. India is
You're absolutely right.
one of the least visited countries by American scholars.
I totally agree.
The Indian government made it fairly difficult for Americans to,
well, the Prime Minister is in process of making it easier to do the.
Yeah, and if that improves, we'll have a lot of.
We can learn from each other.
Yeah, we can. There is need for scholarship from the Indian side.
So that means the private, it has to be public-private partnership there too.
It has to be, yeah.
And I would think that the people like Ambani and the Tata and people like that can play a very significant role.
There are a lot of new universities and institutions in India which are starting to, I think, welcome foreign students and foreign faculties now.
I see when I was there, Chidu, with the President Obama, I see a lot of hope and promise and optimism in the air, which is a very, very important part. That's the first step towards being engaging deeply between the two nations. And there was a warm relationship between President Obama and Prime Minister Modi, who's a pretty smart guy, who's very business-oriented, he's savvy, he's a disciplined. Obviously, he has some challenges also because he doesn't have the majority in Rajya Sabha to pass all the bills from the parliament.
Yeah, but he's. We'll wait and see. I tend to hold my judgment till we give any person.
So he has to match his word with his deeds.
Yeah, a sufficient length of time. So I think we'll wait and see. But yeah, all the signs are that he's a fairly, hardworking and intense person.
When I was in India, obviously, we made some recommendation as a part of the CEO India summit to the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister listened and said that he made a commitment that he will make it easier. What do you think, in your view, the Indian government has to do to attract the foreign investment?
I think this has been spelt out repeatedly by a number of foreign investors and people interested in.
So it's up to India.
It's up to India, and what they're demanding, and I think it's a very legitimate demand, is first of all consistency, transparency,
cutting red tape, economic reform.
These are two things which seem to have most distressed foreign investors, that there is no sense of consistency, that particularly in terms of taxation, there's been a lot of back and
double
forth.
Taxes,
and transparency, that decisions should be transparent, and of course speed.
We're talking about the rules and regulations.
Yeah,
it takes forever to get it done.
Yeah, we are a country
Let me give you an example.
For
delaying
things forever.
Let me give you an example to illustrate my point. The Marriott CEO was there, Arnie Aronson, and he said that it's not the central government, the state government has many rules and regulations to how many paperwork they need to do. So he said these are 14 layers of the, they have to sign up in order for him to have a hotel in Marriott. That doesn't make any sense to me.
It doesn't make any sense, and in fact, I think that there are issues both at the center, at the federal level, and the state level. And one of the ways of getting around it, and a lot of people are talking about this, is to allow states to engage directly.
With the investor,
with investors, and with
and
other,
to bypass the center.
To bypass the center.
Well,
for instance, I'm sure you're aware that a lot of governors from the United States have gone to India on business missions over the years. The governors of Maryland, Virginia, Ohio.
But they still have several layers of the review process. They need to eliminate that
and
reduce it.
For some months, some years now, there's been talk about why not allow states greater freedom and greater leverage
from the central government.
From the central government
makes a lot of sense.
And historically, a lot of Indian provinces and states actually worked fairly independently. If you not just pre-independent, but going back centuries. The state of Karnataka, from where I come from, had a deal with General Electric going back 100 years ago. Dealt directly with General Electric. The kingdom of Mysore was the first to negotiate a power sharing agreement. And Bangalore was the first city to be electrified in India in 1910.
My goodness, long time ago.
Right.
I want to ask you one more question. The Prime Minister's vision on Make in India and smart cities.
I think it's
promising.
It's promising. I am really not sure what they mean by smart cities. I think it needs to be better defined.
Bring in the digital image.
They need a lot more money than they're allotting.
They need to invest.
But I'd also submit that in addition to making our cities, making smart cities, we also need kinder, gentler cities.
Oh, of course, I agree
Our
with that.
cities tend to be really harsh on
Well,
people.
Make in India, the point that I made over here, the content, the domestic contents. I said Make in India should not be make by India, make for India, make in India. And if they do that, it will turn off a lot of investors. So that point was incorporated in our thoughts over there. And I think it's important that and I think there's a little bit of politics between states and the central to put so much restrictions from the making of the domestic content. And I think that will turn off a lot of investors.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point. Again, this is a work in progress.
Work in progress,
yeah.
and I hope
Yeah.
it gets all done so that we can deepen our engagement, and because we are natural allies.
Absolutely, Frank. These are two countries that are tied at the hip, and I see.
And you can play a very important role. All of us can play a
We
very
all
important
can,
role.
yeah.
I intend to play that role. Thank you very much for coming over here. Appreciated that very much.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you for watching. This is Frank Islam wishing you a great week.